My name is Sophia. I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been very good at pretending things were fine. It's late. The house is quiet in that careful way it only is after everyone has gone to sleep. The refrigerator hums. The hallway light is still on because I forgot to turn it off. I almost didn't record this. I don't mean pretending in a dramatic way. There were no broken plates, no neighbors overhearing arguments, no doors slamming. It was softer than that. I got married at 24. I was young enough to believe that love meant endurance, that if you stayed steady, if you didn't complain too much, if you adjusted quietly, everything would settle into place. For a while, it did. We built a routine, 2 kids, a mortgage, weekend grocery runs, group photos where we all leaned in close, smiling like we were meant to. People said we looked solid. I liked that word, solid. It felt safe. But somewhere along the way, something inside me started thinning out. Not breaking, just thinning. I remember one specific night. The kids were already asleep. He was sitting on the couch watching something loud and fast on TV. I was in the kitchen, drying dishes. I kept waiting for him to come stand beside me like he used to, just to talk about nothing, about the day, about what we might do on Sunday. He didn't. When I walked into the living room, he muted the TV and asked if everything was okay. I said yes. I always said yes. It wasn't a lie in the way people think of lies. Nothing terrible had happened. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't distant in a dramatic way. He just stopped seeing me clearly, and I stopped asking to be seen. I think the first time I noticed it deeply was on my 32nd birthday. We had dinner at home. The kids made a mess with frosting. He bought me flowers from the grocery store on the way back from work. I remember holding the bouquet in my hands, smiling, saying thank you. But I also remember feeling like the celebration was happening around me, not with me. Later that night, I stood in the bathroom alone, the house finally quiet. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired. Not from work, not from motherhood, from holding things in. I wanted to tell him I felt lonely even when he was sitting beside me. I wanted to tell him that sometimes I missed who I used to be before I learned to shrink my needs. But every time the moment appeared, it slipped away. He would ask about the kids' schedules. I would answer. He would mention a bill that needed paying. I would nod. Real conversations felt too heavy to place in the middle of all that ordinary life. So I convinced myself that ordinary was enough. There was a morning that stays with me. It was raining lightly. The kids had already left for school. He was in the shower upstairs. I was standing at the kitchen sink, watching water gather along the edge of the window. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, I felt this sudden, sharp awareness of how alone I was inside my own marriage. Not abandoned, just unseen. I tried to trace it back. When did it start? Was it after our second child was born? When sleep became a luxury? When work became more demanding? There wasn't one moment I could blame. It was smaller than that, a collection of tiny dismissals. My stories cut short, my suggestions postponed, my sadness brushed off as stress. I participated in it too. When he asked if I was okay, I said yes. When he didn't ask, I stayed quiet. I told myself that marriages change, that this was what stability looked like, that passion is for younger people. At 34, I found an old notebook from before we were married. I used to write in it often. Small thoughts, plans, things I wanted to try. I flipped through it at the kitchen table while the kids were at school. I barely recognized the handwriting. There was a version of me in those pages that felt curious, certain, alive in a way I couldn't quite name anymore. I closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer. I didn't tell him about it. It felt easier to keep moving, to manage carpools and dinner and laundry, to answer texts with smiley faces, to post photos that showed a happy family. Nothing dramatic was wrong, but something important was missing. The worst part is that I knew. There were nights I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything unsaid pressing against my chest. I would turn toward him, thinking, tonight, I'll say it tonight. But then I would see how tired he looked, or I would remember how busy the next day would be, and I would roll back onto my side. I kept telling myself there would be a better time. There always seemed to be a reason to wait. The realization didn't come with shouting. It came quietly. One afternoon, I was sitting in the car outside the grocery store. I had just finished shopping. The kids were at a friend's house. The sky was pale and flat. I didn't turn the engine on right away. I just sat there, and I felt this strange calm. Not happiness, not anger, just clarity. If nothing changed, this would be my life for the next 20 years. The same small conversations, the same careful silences, the same pretending. I tried to imagine myself at 50, at 60, still saying I was fine. The thought didn't scare me. It just felt unbearably heavy. I realized then that I had been waiting for something dramatic to justify my discomfort, some obvious betrayal, some clear breaking point. But the truth was simpler. I was disappearing slowly, and I was helping it happen. That's hard to admit. He didn't force my silence. I chose it, again and again. I chose peace over honesty. I chose stability over truth. I chose being agreeable over being known. And each time, something inside me stepped back a little further. By the time I turned 36, I could feel how far I'd retreated. We were still functioning, still polite, still cooperative, but there was a distance between us that felt permanent. One night after the kids were asleep, I finally told him I didn't feel close anymore. My voice shook even though I tried to keep it steady. He looked stunned, hurt, confused. He said he thought everything was fine. That word again. Fine. Hearing it from him felt like standing in front of a mirror. I realized I had trained him to believe it. I had spent years saying it. What else was he supposed to think? We talked for hours that night, or maybe it felt like hours. The conversation was awkward and uneven. We stumbled over words we should have said years ago. Nothing was fixed, but something was finally named. I don't know what will happen next. I'm still inside it, still figuring it out. What I do know is that pretending kept me small. It kept us both suspended in something that looked stable, but felt hollow. I'm 36. And I can't say I have everything sorted out. I just know that silence has a cost. If you've been listening this far, maybe you understand that quiet weight, the kind that doesn't show up in photos, the kind you carry alone in a room full of people. You don't have to say anything. Just sit with it for a moment. Sometimes that's enough.